A big complaint attributed to A New Hope is the lackluster lightsaber duel that occurred between Obi-Wan Kenobi and Darth Vader on the first Death Star, and while I can agree that the fight may not have been as fast-paced or stunning as other duels we have experienced, I think the importance of the conflict between the two characters is what truly makes it an iconic and memorable moment in Star Wars. The fight has been cited as slow-paced in large part due to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and saying that a cautious Vader is simply keeping his distance and matching many of Obi-Wan's movements. So what caused an individual that was able to deflect the blows of the legendary Anakin Skywalker and match him in a feat of force strength to deteriorate seemingly rapidly from the time of Revenge of the Sith to A New Hope? Before we officially begin with the possible in-universe explanation for why the fight may have been slower paced, and in particular why Obi-Wan seems to have had such a decline in speed, agility, and power, I would like to make it clear that yes, the out-of-universe explanation is that this was new territory for the filmmakers and filmmaking in general, and at the time it was especially difficult to make an older man and a man in a heavy suit engage in a fast-paced duel, which is why we got the slower-paced but still beautiful duel we did in A New Hope. So with that out of the way, let's discuss why Obi-Wan may have experienced such a decline in his abilities from Revenge of the Sith to A New Hope. After Obi-Wan's duel with Anakin on Mustafar and after the birth of Luke and Leia, Obi-Wan met with Yoda and discussed the future of the Jedi. During the meeting, Yoda informed Obi-Wan that he had been in communication with Qui-Gon, and that during Obi-Wan's exile on Tatooine, he too would learn this new ability. We are all aware that at the end of the Death Star 1 duel, Obi-Wan sacrificed himself and allowed himself to be struck down by Vader so that he could strengthen the Force, and because Obi-Wan felt he could do more good for the light, and Luke by transcending the physical plane of existence and guide Luke using other means. It is my belief that Obi-Wan had been preparing for this moment almost as long as Vader himself had been preparing to duel again, and that Obi-Wan may have already come to peace with his eventual death at the hands of Lord Vader even before he ever met him again. During Obi-Wan's exile, he chose to focus on the more spiritual aspect of the Force, and on the Force as a whole, rather than how he could use it to bolster himself and his abilities. That, along with age, was a large part of Obi-Wan's declined state in A New Hope. It is my assumption Obi-Wan was also beginning to take his first steps into a larger universe or plane of existence, similarly to the way Luke was. Obi-Wan's intense studies and communication with Qui-Gon allowed him to begin to step into the next world and become a Force ghost even before he was struck down on the Death Star. By the time Obi-Wan met up with his former apprentice and friend, his strength in the physical world was flustering as he was more concerned and focused on the next plane of existence. Obi-Wan knew he stood little chance against Vader and the Dark in the physical realm, but he was aware of this and had prepared himself for his transcendence into a Force ghost and knew of the power and foresight his transcendence would grant him. At that moment, Vader was solely focused on the physical and the power the Force could grant his body in the here and now, rather than prepare as Obi-Wan had for how he himself could join with the Force and become more powerful than in that moment Vader could have possibly imagined. Obi-Wan had foresight and knew how to optimize his service to the light, and he surmised through his studies he would be better utilized as a Force ghost and teacher to Luke in his journeys rather than being an outright warrior as he had years prior. Obi-Wan is my favorite Jedi and one of my favorite characters of all time. He knew exactly what he needed to do and when it needed to be done. He was kind, generous, and selfless. Obi-Wan's sacrifice and final moments on the Death Star, face to face with his lost friend, was yet another shining moment in an exemplar man's life. Obi-Wan embodied what a Jedi should be. To briefly surmise the explanation for Obi-Wan's apparent weakened state in A New Hope, his focus had moved past the abilities the Force could grant him physically and had begun to step into the next plane. I also want to make it clear that in A New Hope, Obi-Wan's physical abilities and use in the Force are still far from gone. They are just more removed than from days gone by. Although old Ben Kenobi managed to retain most of his skill with the blade and was still a formidable combatant in his own right despite not being as gifted as he once had been. One day in the future, I would love to go more in depth about Obi-Wan's teachings on Tatooine and learn how he exactly communicated with Qui-Gon and what new information about the Force he learned. I hope this video helped provide an explanation for why Old Ben Kenobi seemed to be less formidable in A New Hope than in Revenge of the Sith. I absolutely love this duel in particular, and along with the other duel in Revenge of the Sith, I think they go perfectly hand in hand. I'm really curious to hear who's your favorite Jedi. Like I said earlier, mine is Obi-Wan for a ton of reasons, so I'd like to hear yours now. Thank you so much for watching, may the Force be with you, and have a great day.